Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Worcester Church. Just want to say happy Thursday. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. If you're joining us, whether that's YouTube Live, come on in. Hope you're having a good time this morning. I'm excited that you guys are here and joining us for another Thursday. Yeah, it's just another day to live, to enjoy life, to be alive, and to serve God. And today we're just gonna just continue the conversation on what are we thirsting for, right? And there's a story in the Bible today that we're just gonna look at. I think this story specifically paints a picture for itself. This story doesn't need a big introduction or anything really added to, because the story in itself is so rich. And I think the story right now really, really paints a good picture of society today, but also how we can learn how to really better love the lost, and how to better love each other. And what more do we need right now than learn how to love each other and how to love the lost? I think love is the answer. And so we're going to read here in Luke chapter 10, right? And it picks up in an expert comes and asks Jesus, a teacher. He says, "Hey, teacher, what's the greatest commandment?" Right? And Jesus tells me, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength." Right? And second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And in order to justify himself, he asks, "Well, who's my neighbor?" Right? That's a good question. Like who should I love? Like who do I need to love as myself? Like who does this define as? Is my neighbor just my physical neighbor who is next door to me? Is my neighbor someone who's actually my friend? Like this is my neighbor, right? Is someone who a trusted person in my life? Is that my neighbor? Are my neighbors my people of influence, my sphere of influence? Are those my coworkers, right? Are those the people that I go to the gym with, people that I see on a daily basis? Are those my neighbor, right? Or are neighbors or maybe just an acquaintance that I might have, right? Or are these big relationships or these small relationships? And he really wants to know who his neighbor is, and in order to figure out, well, who do I really need to love? And I think that's the same question that we have to ask ourselves today: is who do we need to love as members of God's household? Right? Who are we called to love? Jesus answers this question of who is my neighbor, and we're going to pick up in Luke chapter 10, right here in verse 30. In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." We see here from the story of the Good Samaritan that a neighbor was not just limited to someone whose address was next to yours or close to you. It wasn't someone who just lived close to you in vicinity. It wasn't just someone who you may have seen at the local grocery store. It wasn't just someone who may have just happened to live in your community or your city. It wasn't limited to those things, right? A neighbor wasn't just someone who could have been in your immediate family or or even your distant family. No, Jesus shows that a neighbor is the person here who showed mercy. It was the person who showed action, right? All these men, as we can see, lived, in this area, right? And we see that the guy who had gotten beaten down or gotten attacked by the robbers was on his way from Jerusalem to Jericho, right? And so all these guys are passing down this communal path as they're leaving Jerusalem and they're going to Jericho. But the neighbor was the one who decided to put in the action. I want to go far as to say even a neighbor today in society, we look at it, we can eliminate what a neighbor is, but what a neighbor is with God is someone who chooses to put action in on someone who they may not have any connection with and may not even know. And this is I think a lot of times a hard teaching. I think this is one of the most popular stories in the Bible of Christians and even non-Christians today. But the ironic thing about that is I think it's one of the scriptures that's truly hardest to live out. Someone who you have nothing in common with or someone who you're completely different with reaching out to you when they see you on the side of the road in a place that you're hurting and they decide to give a helping hand. It's so, just different than the way society runs. And sometimes it's even different than we in the church can run. Sometimes some of these lines, sometimes we can do just the bare minimum and not really know what it looks like to go deeper in compassion and love. I think the path of least resistance in this area is a lot of times what humans choose. Both the priest and the Levite, they pass to the other side. They weren't the ones inflicting harm on this man. They weren't the ones who caused this man's hardship or his situation. They didn't do the beating or the robbing. They didn't take place in the stealing, but they almost condone it by their idea of letting him stay there, of their idea of letting him dwell in this pain. The reason why we call this Samaritan good is because he stops. Yet when he had no reason to, he goes over beyond in his love. He stops. He takes the man and put him on his own donkey, carries him to an inn, takes care of him, uses his own oil and wine to bandage up his wounds. I think when I think about this, I think about society because Jesus is talking about people who we have no relationship with right here. He's not even talking about someone who, is in the body of Christ. And although this can relate to someone in the body of Christ, in this context, Jesus is talking about a man who you don't even know, a man who may not even look like you or talk like you or be from your part of the town, but you stop when you see that there is a need. And that's just my plea today is that our compassion would reach past our church, our compassion would reach past our own box that we may have created of what it means to love. And our compassion would go to look and help those who are harassed, those who are helpless, those who are oppressed, those who have received injustice, those who are currently going through hardship right now in society. I love that this Samaritan used both his own oil, his own wine, things that he had to be able to help in this situation. He didn't just sit back and say, you know what, I don't have anything to give. He looked at what he had to give. And in that moment, he served. He didn't have to go back home or travel back to a distance. He stopped. And what he had on him, he used in that moment. And this is the question I have for you. What do you have to give? Right? What sense of encouragement or light or motivation or a heart to listen do you have to give? Maybe that's for you. Maybe that's financially supporting causes that could help to set those who are oppressed free. But maybe that is also just an encouragement or a time or a gas or whatever it might be for you to be able to help others who are in a hurting spot today and in this world. I think when Jesus shows this heart, he's speaking to those who would know the law. He's speaking to this expert who would have known what the greatest commandment was, even from back when we see it in Deuteronomy 6. He would have known that it was written to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. But Jesus calls him farther in his love when he tells him to not pass by the other side. But your neighbor is anybody, right? Your neighbor, right, is even a Samaritan, someone who is completely, right, separate from your society, someone who you deem as unworthy, someone who you might deem as not worthy of the gospel. And so I only had a short little time with us to yesterday, but I wanted just to plant that idea in your mind and some of that encouragement in your mind, just to think by today and ask yourself this question: and have I been the one who passes by, or am I the one that strives to meet the need, no matter where I'm at or what it is? And Jesus, he says that, which one of these men is a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robber? And the expert in law replies, the one who had mercy. Jesus says, hey, go and do likewise. My encouragement for us this week is let's go and do likewise.